everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk presented by Forefathers Organics. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, alongside my co-host, Ajay Cybulski, here for the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all the comings and goings from Orchard Park, thanks to our friends at Forefathers Organics in Dansville. At Forefathers Organics, their mission is to liberate, educate, and innovate with the highest quality CBD and hemp-derived products for your mind, body, and soul so you can live happy and free. Visit them at 87 Franklin Street in Dansville, online at forefathersorganics.com, or call them at 585-335-2223 to learn more about the products they offer. You'll be hearing plenty more about Forefathers Organics as we go. Happy to have them on board as a sponsor of the podcast. But let's get down to business. What's up, AJ? Tell the people what we have in store for them today.
Yeah, definitely a exciting week ahead here coming up for the Buffalo Bills. It's really, truly, I think, the kickstart to the 2024 NFL season. All things Bills here. So we're going to get rolling. We have some off-season review from the start of January all the way to today, currently, with what the Bills decided to do in the off-season. And then also some training camp questions we have. We'll work through those. And I just want to shout out one of my one of my best friends from high school drafted. So that's why I'm sporting the Padres hat. If you could not see, if you're listening to this on audio, and by the way, please like, share, subscribe this podcast right here, right now. It would greatly help us. But if you can't see and you're listening on audio, I am sporting a San Diego Padres hat. My one of my best friends from high school got drafted this week in the 9th round to the Padres. So always trying to show some support. Got a hat today from him, and so I'm going to rock it tonight. Might have some trouble seeing my face here. It's hard to see, but I had to rock it for him today, and that's what I'm going to do. So excited to talk some Bills, though.
And being from a small town as you are, AJ, when someone that you're so close with makes it so far, you got to rock the gear, especially when it's free and given to you. In your case, I mean, it makes it a pretty easy decision.
Yeah, small town kid, represented Lakeshore, went to N-Trip, so the JUCO journey, then went to D2, so little D2 like Fred Jackson, you kind of want to make the correlation that D2 journey made it to the pro level, so obviously very proud of him and can't wait to see what he does in his future endeavors.
Shout him out. What's his name?
Zach Evans, shortstop.
Okay.
He's got like 100-mile-an-hour exit velo, a good fielder that his coach said could translate to the pros. Went to Lenore-Ryan, where Kyle Duggar, the New England Patriots safety, went to. So that's kind of like all they care about down there at Lenore-Ryan is Kyle Duggar. It's the field's named after him. So they got a lot going with Kyle Duggar down there. But yeah, their baseball program is also one of the best D2 programs in the country. So he's definitely done a good job and made it to where not many people can. And it's wild. It's surreal.
It's good luck. Good luck to him, and I'll be rooting for him just as you are, AJ. And really, when you're rooting for him, you're rooting for AJ in this circumstance. AJ is really rallying around this kid, really taking it upon himself to rock the Padres gear. So good luck to him. But let's start the podcast by quickly reviewing the offseason. AJ will kind of talk about this on our next podcast, and we do have an event planned this weekend. We're headed out to Mafia Con. Del Reed was gracious enough to throw us an invite, and we'll be out there this Saturday at right around noon. So be sure to check that out. We'll be talking about that more later on in the pod, but let's get this one started and how we think that we arrived at this point. Heading into training camp, a lot has really transpired over the past several months, more so than in past off seasons. Usually when the Bills season ends, it's kind of you're just waiting for training camp and waiting for the offseason program to kick up, maybe a few signings here or there. But with so much transition this offseason, it really was one to remember. Joe Brady and Bobby Babich hired as offensive and defensive coordinator in late January. A month later, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morris, Tre'Davious White, several others released. A month after that, Stephon Diggs traded. Then came the draft. Obviously, the Bills trading out of round one, drafting Keon Coleman. Finally, the offseason program, and Matt Milano returned to the practice field in limited fashion. Still have yet to see how his return from that leg injury will kind of see itself through this preseason. But as we stand today, knowing what's happened this offseason, how do we view the Bills heading into training camp, heading into the preseason? Still a lot of question marks, which we will get to later in the episode. But at this point right now, as it stands, less than a week to go until training camp, how do we view the Bills? If you ask me, I think Super Bowl is still on the table for this team. I don't think much has changed in that regard. And the easy reason is obviously Josh Allen, but you look at the steady leadership that they have with Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, really the catalyst, in my opinion, in building this franchise and really providing that consistent contender that they've delivered year after year. A lot of players have come and gone, but a lot of those players were aging or injured. A lot of the players that departed this offseason. You look at Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer among them, kind of players on, in my opinion, the downside of their career. So in my opinion, the Brandon Beane said it this offseason, change could be good. And I think this is a prime example of that. You let go of some of those guys, as I said, aging kind of on the downside of their career. You welcome in some fresh faces, some new blood. I think the arrow is still pointing up for this team. There's a lot of questions to answer, but I don't think their trajectory has really been changed much at all this offseason.
Yeah, definitely a little bit more skeptical with the team, obviously, with the losses of Jordan Poyer and Mike Hyde. While they didn't play at that elite all-pro level they've in the years past last season, I still thought they brought some juice and kept everything in front of them and did their job. You saw Jordan Poyer lose some of that burst downfield to try and close in on defenders and that speed, but overall, I think losing those safeties is a regression in a way. You're bringing in a lot of new kind of safeties. Taylor Rapp, I know, has experience with the Rams and he had success there, but what is he going to be? He struggled at times last year, kind of got it going. Cole Bishop, who knows, very raw player from Utah. And then Mike Edwards, a guy that's really been in and out of starting lineups, had some injury concerns. So he's been an inconsistent player in his career. So I just look at the overall scope of this Bills team, and I still think they win the division. I still think they get to 11 wins. I have them anywhere from 10 to 12. But I think the division is more wide open than ever before. Just if you look at the Jets roster and the Dolphins roster on paper, I think the Bills, it is their division to win, and I think they're still the kings of the AFC East until they're not. But I mean, you look at the schedule the Bills play; they have a lot of question marks at positions that are important. It's not the quarterback position; they have the best quarterback in the division, so that's obviously very important. But I will say that I'm not as confident going into this season about this team as I've been in the past 3 or 4 years. And that's because, again, you lose a Stephon Diggs, you lose a Mitch Morse, who's been the staple of the offensive line group for many years with Josh Allen. And there's just a lot of change. And while change can be a good thing, with the schedule they face and on top of all the new faces, I think there might be some growing pains. But with Josh Allen, I think anything's possible. I still think Super Bowl is on the table. I think there's been too much criticism of the Bills in terms of what they're going to be this year. I still think, like you said, that Super Bowl should be on the table. They're around plus 1,500, plus 1,600 right now to make it. In years past, they've been like plus 6, plus 7. So Vegas is lower on the Bills as well. And the Dolphins and Jets are actually right behind the Bills for Super Bowl odds. So there are some things that from Vegas's end and national media that the Bills are kind of a bit lower. And again, that's because of the major losses. But yeah, I mean, going into the season, I'm not as confident, but with Josh Allen and Sean McDermott coaching up that defense with Bobby Babich, I still have some faith that they can figure it out, come those later months and, put together a solid season. And hey, a Super Bowl run definitely is not out of the picture.
Yeah, you mentioned the division and the way the AFC East is presenting itself at this point of the offseason. The Jets, in a way, I wouldn't say would scare me if I were the Bills, but certainly have my antenna up with Rodgers returning and all the firepower that they've added. You hear rumors that they might trade for Devontae Adams, although his agent, and I believe he came out and dispelled those rumors recently. You never know what's going to transpire in that situation. But the way that the AFC East is presenting itself for the Bills, they've dominated this division over the past several years, and this could be a year where they could take that dominance to a whole nother level. Unless the Jets are able to fulfill some of that potential and some of those high expectations that a lot of the talking heads are placing on them this offseason, the Dolphins look like they're kind of getting worse this offseason. Obviously, the Patriots are in rebuild mode with a new head coach. So the way the AFC East is laying out, this makes me think the Bills are going to take that dominance within the division to a whole nother level this year, and that will just spur their chase for that Super Bowl championship and really just that next step into the AFC championship where they got a few years ago, and they've kind of hit that stumbling block in the divisional round. But I think everything's on the table for this Bills team this year. It's just like you said, there's a lot of questions left to be answered, and that brings us to our next segment here. Moving on to some of the most pressing questions for the Bills entering training camp. We talked about camp battles a few weeks ago. Took a couple weeks off. Everyone's got to take vacation, AJ, and you enjoyed the 4th of July week and the holiday. I enjoyed the week after. Kind of reset our batteries, and this episode kind of resetting the Bills season as well. But after the offseason concludes and we head into training camp, a lot of these questions will start to be answered. And I think one of the biggest questions for fans, for the Bills to answer, just everybody kind of thinking about who's going to call the plays on this defense this year. Will it be Sean McDermott once again? Will it be the new defensive coordinator, Bobby Babich? I was inclined to think that McDermott will call the plays early during this offseason, but the way things are kind of trending now, and after hearing Bobby Babich speak at OTAs, it just seems like the stars are aligning for him to call this defense. I think he's going to be given a chance during the preseason with Sean McDermott kind of taking him under his wing, as Babich said during his comments. I think all signs at this point, I'm kind of doing a flip-flop here from early in the offseason. I think we see Bobby Babich call the plays for the Bills come week 1.
Yeah, this is a very, I would say, tough question to answer still at this point because, like you've heard all offseason, Alex, Sean McDermott's been committed to don't ask me till training camp. We'll figure it out at training camp. And who knows, that could progress later into training camp and even, a week before the week 1 opener against the Cardinals at home in Buffalo. I don't know who's going to call plays, but Babich does not have, for me, any experience doing it. He's 40 years old. He's been assistant defensive backs coach. He was at Carolina, was with McDermott when he was the defensive coordinator, as a defensive assistant, was with the Browns. So he's been around the NFL, spent some time at Eastern Illinois, Kent State. That's where he got started, was Kent State in 2006. So there isn't a sample size for me to see that he's calling plays. And for Sean McDermott to hand over the keys to a defense that's so fresh, all I'll say is I would feel more confident, Alex, in saying that Babich is going to outright call the plays if Poyer and Hyde were still back there, or if, you know what I'm saying? So at this point.
Yeah, but at the same time, in a sense, with the freshness of this defense, maybe it's a good time for this new defensive coordinator and a lot of these new players to grow together. Maybe you want to start these players in this system with that new voice being Babich.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure. It's hard for me. I think McDermott did a really good job last year. He's talked about how much he enjoyed it. Is he ready to pass that off to Babich? Does he trust him? He hired him, so I'm assuming he does trust him, but it's going to be an interesting development. Either way, Babich's fingerprints, his scheme, his mentality will be all over the defense. There's no doubt about that. I really expect a more aggressive, a faster Bills defense this year attacking the ball. Now, they might get beat over the top a little bit more. They might not be as much as of a bend-don't-break unit, but at the same time, they might turn the ball over more or be, more sack production or whatever the case may be. It's going to be a fun year for this defense. But again, I still could see them regressing on the defensive side of the ball with all the new faces and a pass rushing unit that you don't know really who's going to be that guy. You hope Greg Rousseau or Von Miller can get back to what he was, but there's just a lot of questions right now. And with this defense where it's at, I'm just really undecided. My gut would tell me McDermott's still going to call the plays. So I guess I'll go on the other side of the coin of you with what you said. But I could see totally Babich taking over play calling this year. And there is a vision, like you said, for that to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nowhere to go. Maybe not nowhere, but to say that this team might regress, that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. To look at the stats that they put up last year, I mean, top 10 in
Right.
passing yards allowed, top 15 in rushing yards allowed. So this was a team that didn't allow a lot of offense last year. And something else that leads me to believe that Babbage, the more I've thought about it, may be in line to take this bull by the horns and call the defensive plays this year. Just the trajectory of his career, it's really been a steady rise for him. Kind of coaching the defensive backs, then leading that unit to greatness, moving over to linebackers, helping out that crew, and now taking on the entire defense. And a young coach like this, and a coaching star that's really on the rise. In order to keep a guy like this around, you got to give him added responsibility. You can't expect that you're going to let him go through a whole season kind of in the background, coaching the defense, but not calling the plays. And then come the next offseason, it's tough to expect him to stick around and not pursue a greater opportunity somewhere else. And with this younger, more inexperienced defense within this system, you'd kind of like to see some continuity built over the next couple of years. So I think in order to keep him around, I think you have to give him those responsibilities, and we'll see how it works out. I think, like I said, he'll get that chance during the preseason. If things go horrible for Babbage during the preseason calling the plays, I don't think we'll see him get a chance during the regular season. But if he's able to make his way through the preseason, we don't see any glaring errors or miscues with the Bills defense. I think Babbage will continue along that trajectory to calling plays. But another unknown entering training camp is whether or not Von Miller will return to the Von Miller of old. At this point last year, AJ, we were talking about Miller and if he could return week one, how effective he would be. He was talking himself up, and now we've heard him talk in the offseason how all that talk was misguided. He shouldn't even have been on the field, and yada, yada, yada. I don't know if I'd go that far as to flip-flop from week one, having those high expectations and then kind of bagging the whole season. But the more it looked last season, it certainly appeared as if he did not deserve to be out there. 3 tackles for Miller last season in 32% of the snaps over 12 games played. So really a traffic cone out there for the Bills. There's nowhere to go but up for Miller, and he took a lot less money this season. Playing time incentives, sack incentives, littered throughout his contract now after he helped the Bills, who were in cap hell entering the offseason. So credit to him for that. But he's got to answer with some production. This team losing Leonard Floyd, they need to replace that double-digit sack production that they lost with Floyd's departure. And you have Greg Rousseau and AJ Epineza, 2 players who we'll talk about later in this podcast. But for Von Miller, this is a big year for him, and it's going to start in training camp. You have to start seeing some of the signs of old Von Miller. And excuse me. Some of that bend and burst off the edge, getting hands on balls during training camp, rushing Josh Allen. You're not going to be able to see him down any of the Bills quarterbacks wearing that red non-contact jersey, but you have to start seeing some signs from Miller here during training camp.
Yeah, definitely a make or break season really for Von, because they could get rid of him after this season, and they might go that route if he doesn't perform, just due to salary cap concerns. I think Von is, he's probably working his tail off and trying to get back to what he was at 35 years old. So he's definitely getting up there in age. So there's a little concern there, coming off another ACL injury, but he did show some promise in that Chiefs game where he finished with 2 tackles. So 2 of his 3 tackles came in the playoffs. So good for Von, I guess. He showed some juice. You're muted, Alex.
The 3 tackles I had were regular season.
Okay. So, yeah, he had 2 tackles.
You're right, though. You're right, though. He did come along in that Chiefs game, showed, I'll say minor signs, but a few slight signs of returning to that old player.
So it's a little bit important it's really essential, for Von to be at least a 6 to 8 sack guy. I don't really see any other way around it if the Bills want to have success, unless a Javon Solomon can come from Troy in the MAC conference and, step into a bigger role. I just don't see really an avenue where, maybe a Casey Toolhill can do something.
What about Vincent's question? Do you think there's any chance the Bills might go out on the free agent market, bring in a pass rusher to help bolster this unit? Other positions in need, maybe a defensive back elsewhere. What are your opinions on that?
I would go the guy I've always said, and let me make sure I'm right with the name here, Emmanuel Agba. He's a guy that's still available that I'm interested in just because he had some production in Miami. He's in his early 30s. He's a guy that could still, maybe make an impact and be a rotational guy. So I don't really know if the Bills will go that route, but again, they saved the 10 million post June 1st with Trey White and haven't really done much yet. But I think they might hold off till the season. A lot of people are clamoring for a Brandon Ayuk, to Vincent's question, to try and we need this wide receiver. Right now, it just does not make sense to me. I feel like they're at a spot where there's so much unknown at the wide receiver position that it's kind of a good thing. And why would you part ways with future draft assets and pay a guy 25 plus $1 million per year if you don't need them? Now, if they're 5 games, 6 games through the year and their production from the receivers, Samuel can't get it going. Shakir is having drop issues. Coleman's not winning those 50-50 balls like they drafted him for. Then I think you could explore those veteran receivers that might be on the market, like an Ayuk, if the 49ers, who say they're not going to trade him, they survived the Deebo Samuel trade request, so they're going to maybe try and survive the Brandon Ayuk trade request. So it'll be interesting to see if the Bills make any moves before the season starts. But I'd beg to differ that Brandon Beane, and I don't think they really do, to Vincent's question. Like, I don't think they need to, make any major moves right now. I think they're pretty set in with what they're going to be, and we'll see how it goes. There's not really many options. I'm trying to scroll through here, and there's really nothing. Emmanuel Agba, Carl Lawson, Yannick Ngakoue. He's a guy that's had some juice. Made $10.5 million last year, but he's still unsigned. So obviously there's some decrease in production. But after that, Shaq Lawson's still available, Alex. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not really a difference maker that's really going to set the edge room apart. So I don't know. I think I wish they could trade for an edge rusher. I wish they had a Myles Garrett. I wish they had a TJ Watt. I wish they had a game wrecker on the edge that could change a game of Trey Hendrickson. But that's not what they have, and they're going to really have to hope that the development of Epinesa, Rousseau, and Von Miller, which was what the original question was about, comes to show up and makes the most of his opportunity with the Bills and helps them achieve what they want to achieve.
And another player that's got a lot to prove this season, we touched on him earlier, but Matt Milano coming back from that leg injury. A bit of mystery regarding that injury. Seemed a bit more severe than just your run-of-the-mill broken leg. He comes back in a similar situation that Miller found himself last year, Tre'Davious White, I believe the year before, and the fact that there's a lot of expectations being thrown around when he will return, in what capacity. I think the one thing that works in Milano's favor in terms of a rapid return for him is the fact that he put some practices out there during OTAs and minicamp, something that Miller and White didn't do leading into training camp. They went into camp still needing to get on the field with trainers and work out in that fashion. But Milano's been out there during OTAs and minicamp, albeit in a limited fashion. Now the next step is him getting out there full go. And McDermott did lay out some expectations for Milano weeks ago, saying that they were targeting training camp all along for that full return. But still plenty yet to prove for him. He's kind of the cornerstone of this defense, if you really look at it, with all the comings and goings on the roster, with the two safeties being lost, Tre'Davious White out the door. That's 3 former All-Pros walking out the door. You now have Milano and Taron Johnson maybe as the 2 catalysts of this defense leading into this year, but a lot to expect from a player coming back from as significant of an injury as he suffered this past season. And what expectations should we be placing on Matt Milano? Should we be expecting the Matt Milano of old as early as week 1, 2, 3, 4, or may it take some time, do you think, to see Milano return to that full efficacy at the linebacker position? I'll tell you what, if he's able to return to any semblance of Matt Milano of the past, he playing alongside Terrell Bernard going into his second season, just things starting to slow down for Bernard as he gains better grasp of the defense. I think the sky's the limit. I've said it before. I'll say it again for this unit. But like I said, I think a lot left to be proved for Milano in terms of his return from that injury. It's going to be tough for him to kind of hit the ground running in training camp, I think. But maybe as the preseason goes along and you see him out there, perhaps with his teammates in full contact situations, might be able to see some positive steps from him.
Yeah, it's a big year for Matt, just like we're going through all these players here. Milano definitely turns 30 in 10 days. So that will be his 30th birthday. Probably, I think that'll be during training camp. So he'll be turning 30 during the 2024 training camp session. But yeah, I'm interested to see Milano's return from that leg injury. Obviously, more severe, I think, than people let on. Brandon Bean spoke at an event at One Bills Drive where he had an open questionnaire with the fans and kind of mentioned like they hope for him to be back by training camp. It was obviously great progression to see him at least on the field during, was it minicamp and OTAs both, or just minicamp?
Just minicamp.
So good to see him back for Milano to be on the field during minicamp. Definitely a positive sign, but not really any hitting or pads. So that'll take it up a notch in training camp, and we'll see what he's able to do there. And yeah, I don't know what he's going to be. There is some concern there if he can be that former All-Pro at this point in his career. Now, NFL scouts executives still ranked him. Jeremy Fowler came out with his ESPN article ranking all the positions. He was still the third best linebacker in football, according to many executive scouts. So that's definitely important. I think that means something. If NFL executives and scouts are saying that about a player who didn't even play really last season, to still be behind only Fred Warner, and I believe it was Roquan Smith, is elite company. So yeah, I don't really know what to expect from Milano. I hope to see him stay healthy this year. It's going to be really important for him to be there down the stretch. Him and Bernard complemented each other very well in the beginning. Bernard was, getting to the quarterback, making, splash plays all over the field, splash plays galore. I think they complement each other well. And yeah, it's going to be very important for Milano to get back to form if the Bills want to be an above average defense this upcoming season.
If you look back to his All-Pro season, and what a season it was for Milano. 3 interceptions, return one for a touchdown, a couple of fumble recoveries, a sack and a half, 99 combined tackles, just all over the field for this unit. I mean, he's not gonna leave the field with the way that this team plays. That 2 linebacker set, he's gonna have as many opportunities as anybody, and if he can put forth a similar season to what he put on display in 2022, that would be a boon for this unit. But that might be a little tall expectations for Milano coming off that injury. But like you said, the respect of his peers coming off that injury, going into his age 30 season, as you mentioned, for him to be thought of amongst his peers in that high regard, that certainly is saying something, entering what is a critical year for him in his return. But going on to our next question, and the final question mark that we'll discuss here today, the uncertainty surrounding the new kickoff rule. Who will be the Bills' new kick and punt returner? Will it be the same player? Will they kind of split the duties? I think the 3 leaders in the clubhouse right now might be KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella, Daquan Hardy, maybe Khalil Shakir has an opportunity to return punts. I've liked Hamler all along. You heard me talk about it when we started this podcast. He's kind of been up and down throughout the offseason, dropped a couple passes, came up with a big catch. I think the only opportunity for him to crack this roster is if the Bills keep 7 wide receivers. He hasn't done a lot of kick returning or punt returning in the past few years. Only 5 combined kick punt returns for the Broncos in 2020, none since then. But he does have experience doing both, and a bit more than Hardy doing both. Averaged 23.5 yards, over 44 kick returns at Penn State, 6 per punt return on 37 punt returns at Penn State. That's over 2 seasons. Hardy, 17 punt returns, but just 3 kick returns in college at Penn State. Really, 1 season was when he was Penn State's primary punt returner, 14.5 yards per punt return last season. So Hardy may be more adept in punt returning. Hamler certainly has more experience, albeit at the collegiate level. Kick returning, it'll be interesting to see what route the Bills go. The new kickoff rule, throwing a monkey wrench into things for special teams coordinators and extra decisions to be made for head coaches. And I think it remains to be seen how the Bills will attack this new rule. We didn't see much from from them during the offseason. I think training camp is a perfect time for figuring those things out and kind of working out the kinks and figuring out what you want to do. I think that also extends to the kicker position. I'm not sure if the Bills will decide on a kickoff specialist. Perhaps they have their punter do the kicking. Perhaps they stick with Tyler Bass. We've heard talks from other teams of position players mixing in. So a lot yet to be decided for the Bills there, and it really starts with the punt and kick returner. I think at this point, I'd like to see Hamler work his way in there, the speed that he offers. And if you're able to keep him around on the roster, a potential role on offense could develop. And like I said all along this offseason, I like what he brings to the table.
Yeah, there's those four names really. Daquan Hardy, again, had some experience. KJ Hamler, just some more numbers for you listening. He was number 3 in the Big Ten, number 18 in the nation with 26.2 kick return average. And then he finished number 4 in the conference and number 31 in the nation with 619 combined return yards. So the success goes back a little while, obviously, but there's still some prowess for him to show some ability come training camp and maybe get himself a roster spot. And Shakir, again, has some experience in both the kick and punt return throughout his career. John Robert here in the comments. Jack Browning could do kickoffs, but Bass on field goals definitely a possibility if Jack Browning were to win the Punt-a-Palooza battle. So there's definitely many options on the table. Again, Daquan Hardy has some experience. Andy Isabella returned some kickoffs last year in the preseason, and maybe some punts as well. I'm not quite sure, but there is some return experience on this team. I'm interested to see what route they go, but it would be awesome. I think the best scenario would be for Daquan Hardy to win the battle, just because I think he also would offer a backup slot option to the team, where I think that's more valuable, because I think Saran Neal was more of a not a hybrid player, not like a hybrid linebacker, but I think he struggled mightily when called upon at that slot corner position with Teron Johnson going out. He's been banged up at some times with concussions and other knick-knack injuries. So I think Hardy would be an ideal situation just because of the fact he can contribute to a critical nickel spot on the Bills defense if he's able to, which is what he did at Penn State, while also being that kickoff or punt returner. So I think that's cool, but I think the Bills do decide to keep 7 this year at receiver. So if it's Hamler or Isabella for that specific reason, and they have the room to do it, then that would make sense as well.
Yeah, I think it's really going to come down to which player you do want to keep at the bottom of your roster for some depth, whether you want Hardy out there at the nickel corner position. You also have Cam Lewis, who factors in as a backup for Teron Johnson. So not quite sure if Hardy would be the immediate backup to Johnson if he were to go down, and really not sure what role Hamler's would be in the offense. I think it would take maybe a couple injuries for him to work his way in with the way Chase Claypool has come on during this offseason. You still have Mac Hollins, who his role on offense kind of yet to be determined as well. So I think both of these players have a outside shot of making the roster, but I think their returnability certainly helps them in that regard. All right, before we move on to our final portion of today's episode of Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo Football Talk, let us once again thank Forefathers Organics. At Forefathers Organics, their mission is to liberate, educate, and innovate with the highest quality CBD and hemp-derived products for your mind, body, and soul, so you can live happy and free. Visit them at 87 Franklin Street in Dansville, online at forefathersorganics.com, or call them at 585-335-2223 to learn more about the products they offer. All right, in our last segment, we'll discuss for whom the pressure is on this season, AJ. This was your idea for this podcast, and I think it's a good one, kind of to give the fans an idea of who might be on the hot seat, whose seat might be getting warmer, and who really is under the gun to perform for the Bills this season. And that conversation obviously starts with the head coach and Sean McDermott. The fans have been after Sean McDermott, not all the fans. Some of the fans have been after Sean McDermott the past few years, with the Bills stumbling in that divisional round and in the way that they have. And and rightfully so. And you lose in the fashion that the Bills have over the past few years. It really is tough to swallow for many fans. But is that criticism warranted? How much pressure is placed on Sean McDermott this season? I think if you ask me, I don't think within the organization there's much pressure. Me and you discussed this off camera, but in terms of the fans, I think if McDermott and company don't get off to a good start this season, don't hit the ground running, and there are some stumbles and as you mentioned earlier in the episode, some growing pains over the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, we could really see that pressure meter start to pop for Sean McDermott. Uh, he's done a great job leading this team back to prominence and guiding them out of that postseason drought and creating a championship contender here in Buffalo. But at the same time, the talk now is getting this team over the hump. And when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen and you have the roster that the Bills still have and just the positions that you've put yourself in the playoffs, winning the division year after year, fans are waiting for that next step to be taken. And I think if you don't see signs of that next step being taken this year and you don't see some of these offseason additions really work their way in and fit into their roles, I think McDermott will be the most to blame amongst the fan base.
Yeah, I think this is a huge year, especially like you said from the fans. And I want to preface what I'm about to say with I think McDermott's a top 10 coach in the NFL. I would say more toward the bottom half of that list, but coaching ranking's stupid anyway. So it's really whatever whatever whoever believes that whatever coach is better, it's all different.
Didn't you
Whatever
hear best
person.
coach in sports, AJ? Didn't you hear?
Yeah, best coach in sports. So yeah, I would say he's still a top 10 coach in this league, and I have a column coming out tomorrow regarding just the Bills and their upcoming season, going into training camp, and I think he's an integral part of the Bills making a Super Bowl push, and I think that still should be the goal. But I just wanted to say that McDermott has shown signs of, and it's not, you're blind if you don't see it because it's clear as day. In the playoffs and big moments, the defense has crumbled, and it happened in 2021. We all know what happened there. It happened last year. I know the defense stepped up, and there was a lot of injuries happening, and the fake punt was a mess. Whoever decided that call, but that obviously falls on the head coach. You have to wonder, is Sean McDermott the guy? And I'm a believer that Sean McDermott can't say a guy can't do something just because he hasn't done it. Like just because Sean McDermott has yet to win a Super Bowl does not mean he's not capable of winning Super Bowl. If Sean McDermott was fired tomorrow morning by the Bills, 20 teams, 15 to 20 teams in the NFL right now would be like, okay, we want Sean McDermott as our head coach. So don't think that like because I'm saying this, I don't think Sean McDermott's not a good coach. But there is some questions to ask about him in the big moments, and the divisional round every year. You have Josh Allen in his prime. How many more years are you willing to necessarily waste with a generational quarterback on a Hall of Fame trajectory? That's doing things that not many quarterbacks have ever done. He's putting it all in the line. Has the lowest interception rate in playoff history. Has the most touchdowns per game in the playoffs in NFL history. And you only have one AFC Championship game appearance to show for it. I just think that there's some questions with McDermott regarding that. Whether it's been bad luck, it's been injury luck. That's also in my column. I talk about injury luck and how that's played a big role in the Bills' downfall the past couple of years. And injuries happen all around the league, but it's been critical injuries to critical players at key times. So hopefully that can change this season, and the Bills can get some more luck in that regard. So yeah, I just think McDermott has a lot of pressure from the fans. The more they lose, the more questions come on the coach. He signed an extension just a couple off seasons ago to keep him with the team. So there's obviously some trust with Terry Pagula on that front office that he's the guy that can get him over the hump. I believe he can get them over the hump, but it comes a time and place where change is necessary. And I think there's time's ticking because there's not many more debacles where you can go through and say, we'll learn from this, we'll learn from this, we'll learn from this, because they have yet to prove that. They can say whatever they want after a postseason, another heartbreaking loss, another 27-10 Cincinnati Bengals loss. But until it's actually on the field and we see it, I think fans have every right to feel a little bit more pressure on McDermott and think that he may have an opportunity of, maybe not getting fired after the season, but Alex, it has to come eventually, right? Like they can't just keep making these divisional round appearances and they're saying, okay, they're overhauling everything. New coordinators. They got rid of their two dynamic safeties. They're bringing in a new offensive philosophy, a new offensive coordinator. Change their center. So there's a lot of moving pieces, which to McDermott's credit might be tougher, but the pressure's still on him because that's what they chose to do, and they still have Josh Allen. So it really doesn't matter. So yeah, that's just my spiel with the whole McDermott thing, and I really think the pressure's on him in 2024.
Yeah, I think you alluded to it. My next point. What about Brandon Beane? I think if you look at it critically and you take emotion out of it, I think more pressure is on Beane this season with all the moves that the team made to restructure this offensive weaponry and most of the defensive secondary, to be quite honest with you, with the two new safeties that are going to come in here and also the depth at cornerback. But what about Beane? He's the one who bought the groceries for McDermott this offseason. I think a lot of pressure will be heaped upon him in terms of how these players produce this season. I don't know if the fans are ready to criticize Beane. He's really a fan favorite and has kind of evaded the slings and arrows from fans over the years. But I think if things don't work out and some of these new pieces and some of the players that they've put in new roles this season don't bear fruit immediately, I think the pressure meter with Beane will start to rise as well.
I'll tell you what, with that, if Xavier Worthy turns out to have a better season than Keon Coleman, there will be some major backlash, I think, from fans regarding Beane's decision to trade back not just once,
get
but
the
twice.
pitchforks out.
Right. So and also Xavier Legette, another player that went right before Buffalo at pick 32 from South Carolina. He was a guy that I think many Bills fans thought the Bills had major interest in, and they obviously did not go that direction. They stuck with Coleman at 33. So he has made some trading Stephon Diggs. There's another major decision. Was that the right one? Now, he might have had not as much control of that situation because I truly believe that Diggs did not want to be here anymore. But it's still a decision that had to be made and a critical one at that, moving on from a guy that's been the wide receiver one, the alpha of this offense for the last 4 years. So you're right. You hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of change. Beane is going to get some criticism. You look at Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, two developmental projects. Will they actually truly develop, or are they kind of at their ceiling? Have they hit their full potential? So it really does come down to how do the edge rushers perform? What does the wide receiver room look like? And that Keon Coleman pick, I think, is the big one because they really, traded back twice and took him at 33 when some thought he would go late second round, early third. You really have to have some questions if Coleman doesn't work. My expectations for Coleman aren't much. 30, 45, 55 catches, 600 yards. I'd be okay with how I think this offensive philosophy from Joe Brady will be. But you still have to ask yourself the question. I don't think Beane's going to get fired anytime soon. I think he's done enough good throughout his career. He's made quality moves. The Rasul Douglas trade. There's a plethora I could go on and on about. So it'll be interesting to see what the narrative is if Worthy is a baller and Coleman struggles. That'll be the pitchfork scenario like we're talking about.
Yeah, Gary Chad, I think his point is well taken. I think Keon Coleman has a better opportunity to become the Bills' number one wide receiver than Worthy would have been, kind of more of a speed guy, someone that I think you use to complement a number one wide receiver. While I think you could place Coleman's ceiling at a number one wide receiver. I think this year, my expectations, I think we've talked about it in the past, maybe at Gabe Davis's numbers from a year ago, 700 yards, 7 touchdowns. I think everybody would be happy with that from Coleman this year. And as much pressure that's on McDermott and Beane, if things go right for these two, and I wrote about this in Bill's Digest, the training camp preview, now available, billsdigest.com, this could be the duo's finest hour. If they make all these moves this offseason, you get rid of Stephon Diggs, you release all these veterans, you bring in all these new weapons, you draft a Keon Coleman after trading back out of the first round. If things go right for the Bills, and if things go right immediately for the Bills, we did our win-loss on our last podcast. I was a bit optimistic. I think I picked 13-4, 14-3, something like that. But if things go that well for the Bills this season, this could be McBean's finest hour.
Yeah, there's also that path always with stuff like this because you never know which way it will truly go. If Cole Bishop comes out and gets starting opportunity, and Babbage and McDermott coach him up, and the DBs look good, and Greg Rousseau develops, and Ajay Cybulski develops, and they're becoming these double digit sack getters and getting all these pressures and splash plays. Yeah, that would definitely be a sight to see for this regime, and definitely help them with their confidence as well as the team's confidence. It's a really big year, a lot of turnover, but there is still some hope that I think, and I have some hope personally that I think McDermott is the guy, that he can be the guy, that Bean is the general manager to figure this out and bring a Lombardi to Buffalo. There's no doubt in my mind that they can do it. It's just there's a lot of factors, and we'll see what happens in September.
And just quickly touching on the coordinators one more time, how much pressure is on this duo? In my opinion, more pressure on Joe Brady than Bobby Babich. Brady's the CEO of this offense. McDermott's still kind of the CEO of the defense, whether or not Babich calls the plays. So I think everything is on Brady to make all these new pieces fit and to make them fit well for Josh Allen and to give him the right structure at his disposal to succeed and lead this offense into a new era without Stephon Diggs. So if you were to ask me, more pressure on Brady than Babich entering the season.
I'm with you. I think defensively, there's more pressure on McDermott, than either of Babich or Brady, just because again the roster turnover and what the Bills need to do this year for I think the fans to be satisfied. I think it has to be, unless major injuries occur or Josh Allen goes down. I think it's legit AFC Championship, or it's going to be. It's just going to keep that volume just going to keep going up and up and up. So yeah, I think between Brady and Babich, there's more pressure on Brady, like you said. He has a lot of things to figure out, and you're working with Josh Allen. If you can't figure it out with Josh Allen, Ken Dorsey, the former OC, although they I think struggled at time to find rhythm, and it felt like not a lot of creativity within the offense. They still put up points and still scored. So if you're struggling with Josh Allen at quarterback, which I don't think is the case, because I think maybe not a big enough of a sample size, but they were second in points last year under Brady and about fourth in yardage. So they were still top five in yardage and points last year. I think there's some hope that Brady can just kind of rejuvenate what he did. But again, no Diggs, no Davis. More tools in the toolbox this year, though, I think, to use. I think they have more depth, but the top heavy guys aren't as highly touted or as highly notable. So we'll see. It's going to be a big year for Brady and Babich, but like you said, I think Brady has more pressure on him just because if you don't make it work with Josh Allen, then you definitely aren't going to. And he's had a job before, right, Alex? Like Babich has never been a DC. Brady's already been removed after a year and a half with the Panthers. So what are you going to, two firings and within 4 or 5 years, 2 opportunities. How many more can he get before he really has to settle back into that quarterback's coach role for a longer period of time?
And that brings me to my next point. You mentioned Josh Allen. There's been a lot of discussion. You mentioned it earlier, overrated, underrated. I think he's starting to become underrated with all this talk of overrated. I don't know how you can underrate Josh Allen. He's the number 1 fantasy quarterback, and usually fantasy stats are a good telltale of how productive a player is year in and year out. And Josh Allen just carries this offense. I don't know how you could see it any other way, but you take it for granted. With that being said, you take it for granted that he's just going to go out there and lead this team to greatness year in and year out. How much pressure is on Josh Allen this year without Stephon Diggs, trying to guide a Dalton Kincaid in his second season, another player with a lot of pressure on him is his second season, no longer a rookie. It's no longer, it's a good season for a rookie. The training wheels are off. He's expected to be one of the top tight ends in the league. A lot of people comparing him to Travis Kelce in terms of the role that he'll play within the Bills offense. So you look at Josh Allen with all the new pieces, trying to make it all work with a second-year coordinator that took over midway through last year. A lot of pressure on Josh Allen entering the season as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a big amount of pressure on Allen. I think there is. I wouldn't say concern. Like I don't know if he'll regress. His passing yardage line from Vegas, and I like Vegas because it just gives me kind of a reference of what the public's thinking. It's at like $3,700 yards for this upcoming season. He surpassed that every season the past 4 years. So it's not like he's, doing he's not there's got to be a reason for that. And I think Allen's pressure is very high because you're taking over a team where now I will say, Alex, if he does have a great season and takes this team to the playoffs, wins the division, this could be an MVP season for Josh. Like he's going to have to put on the Superman cape at least for the start of the year before they figure things out. And I know he's done that in years past, but this year for him, I really think he's going to have to put on the Superman cape and really carry this team against who in my opinion, on paper, the Jets and Dolphins are more talented than the Bills on paper. Now, Josh is the better quarterback, but I think there's a lot of pressure on him to not only win the division for the 5th straight year, but to stay healthy, to make sure that he's utilizing, like you said, a Dalton Kincaid that they took in the first round in 2023, using a Curtis Samuel that they paid $8 million to in the offseason, a Khalil Shakir that was on the rise towards the back half of last year, a Keon Coleman, who they spent an early second-round pick on. So there's a lot of pressure on Josh. I think it's okay to be critical of Josh. I think there's still some things he needs to work on. Obviously, limit the turnovers that cost the Bills some games in years past. But this is really what this whole offseason comes down to, Alex. And here we are, really 1 week away from training camp is whatever Josh Allen is really what the Bills are. And I'm not saying that the defense can't carry and then they're not going to be a top 10 unit. Maybe they can be. But Josh Allen has a lot of expectation and pressure because he is without his diva, without his alpha receiver, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do without his number one and his number 2 guy in Gabe Davis.
Yeah, elsewhere on the offense, we mentioned Kincaid, and we'll kind of wrap these two together as we're running out of time. James Cook and Dalton Kincaid, probably the 2 most important members of this offense, not named Josh Allen. Drops have been a concern for Cook. He's got a contract year coming up. Can he repeat the success that he found last year and grow in other areas such as pass protection that would allow him to become a true 3-down back, which I don't think the Bills were very comfortable in placing him in such a role a season ago, relied on Latavius Murray. There was a stretch there late in the season, I think 3-4 straight games where Cook was playing under 50% of the Bills' offensive snaps. So I think in order for Cook to take the next step, he's really got to put it all together in all phases of his game, catching the ball, holding on to the ball, running it, also pass protection, like I said. Just everything needs to come together for Cook and a lot of pressure on him to do so, as he will be relied on most likely just as heavily. You might see his workload reduced a bit as the Bills lost one of their 3 running backs last year early on in Damian Harris, and it appeared as if the Bills were comfortable with somewhat of a 3-back rotation until he went out. And then obviously as the season progressed, you relied on Latavius Murray and Cook really as that 1-2 punch before trying Leonard Fournette later in the year, but that never really came to pass. So a lot of pressure on Cook, and I mentioned already with Kincaid, a lot of pressure on him as well. These 2 players are going to tell the story of kind of how this Bills offense goes this year. You look at the wide receiving core, I place Curtis Samuel as the X factor, but the 2 true X factors for this offense are James Cook and Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, James Cook last season, 634 snaps, so 55% of the snap share. I think that's where I kind of have him around this year. We talked previously today, and I think Ray Davis has an avenue to see 20-30% of the snaps. I think Ty Johnson has an avenue to see 10 to 15%. And they got younger at the position. I think last year, like we said, Latavius Murray was a runner that you saw some juice at the beginning of the year, but towards the tail end of it, he struggled. And I think he was just on the field because they truly trusted him to do his job and do his role. I don't think it was because he was clearly the better running back. I think they just trusted him more at times than a James Cook, who, again, looked lackadaisical in key moments and big moments throughout the season. So I see James Cook as a true X factor with this offense. I think he's a guy who, again, like you said, has to clean up the drops. He was a 2nd-round pick out of Georgia. He wasn't really highly touted as a guy who likes a lot of volume, maybe a little bit more efficiency, averaged just under 5 yards a carry last year. So 4.7 yards, excuse me. That might be wrong. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, 4.7. I'm reading I am right. I should just trust myself. 4.7 yards per attempt last year, down from 5.7 in 2022. But again, he had almost 150 more attempts from his sophomore year to compared to his rookie season. So obviously the efficiency might go down. But just I want to see him utilizing the passing game. I want to see him be a consistent guy. Maybe a screen game this year, Alex. More of that. And then Dalton Kincaid wise, I think again, like you said, should be the number one guy. He's not in his rookie year anymore. He needs to elevate his game to that level where he's consistently beating middle linebackers, nickel corners, winning 50-50 balls, winning at every level of the field, underneath, in the middle, deep. So, yeah, Dalton Kincaid key, James Cook key. We've been talking about it all year, or all off season, and it's going to be fun to see what Kincaid and Cook can do with the Joe Brady offense. I'm looking forward to it.
And then defensively, Greg Rousseau tops my list of players who really must up their game this season. He played in 16 games last year. He was a bit injured, but played about 20% more of the snaps than Ajay Epineza, and he was out-sacked by Epineza. So between these two players, both of them have to up their game, but I think between them, Rousseau, a lot of pressure on him to become the Bills' leading sack getter with the absence of Leonard Floyd, who came in here last year and produced 10.5 sacks. You need more from Rousseau. You need him to stay healthy. You need him to start taking steps as a pass rusher. You love his ability in the running game, but taking a step back the way he did last year, albeit injuries did play a role, but going from 8 sacks to fewer last year, I believe he finished with 5. Not great for Rousseau last season. Needs a rebound year and needs to produce as one of the top sackers in the league. It was a valiant effort from him last year, but I think a lot more is to be expected from him. And like I said, Ajay Epineza, I think he's on the rise, but being inserted into a more significant role this season, the pressure's on him as well.
Yeah, Greg Rousseau is a huge factor to this defense. I think the most important factor, because that's obviously my biggest concern. I've said that since the beginning of the offseason is the pass rushing group, and you want to see those guys continue to take steps. Epinesa, Rousseau, the two big ones. They re-signed Epinesa, hoping that maybe Epinesa's hoping he can a nice 2-year bridge deal, and then show off a little bit of his skill and ability, and maybe get some more money elsewhere, or maybe stay with the Bills if he really can get it going and the Bills value him. But yeah, again, we've said it over and over. I think Epinesa and Rousseau are two vital parts of this defense, and they need to be the players that the Bills projected them to be when they were drafted, and make plays in big games and big moments, and really not only take their game to the next level, but leadership to the next level, and just their overall impact on this Buffalo Bills defense in 2024.
And finally, special teams. This player might have the most pressure on him of really any player this season, maybe tied with a few other players. But Tyler Bass, a really disappointing season last year. We all know how it ended for him in that Chiefs game. An up and down off-season training program. Started out, made a 70-yard field goal. I believe finished that day 7 for 7. Then finished something like 4 of 8 on kicks the next time we saw him. The holders changed between those two. It was Sam Martin the second time. It was Jack Browning the first time. It has yet to be decided, I think, who's going to be the starting punter there and who's going to hold for Bass this season. But a lot of pressure on him to rebound, 82.8% make percentage last year. That was a low from his rookie season. I believe he was somewhere up around 87, 88% the previous 2 years, and then dipping all the way down to 82.8%. Certainly a concern, and a lot of pressure on Bass to figure it out. And the added responsibilities, perhaps, of the new kickoff rule as well, but that has yet to be determined. Giving Bass the contract that the Bills did a few years ago, you kind of went into this season not thinking that they had much wiggle room there, but next year and in the years beyond, I think he needs to start earning his money and kind of earning his spot on this roster, or else his time in Buffalo could be wearing thin.
Yeah, kind of like we did the last couple of weeks, Alex. We recharged our batteries. Tyler Bass needs to recharge his battery this offseason and really focus on the 50-plus yard field goals are a thing. That's obviously important, but obviously ending the season like he did is a major concern, and that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So I hope he uses that for the good. They figure out who's the best holder, because again, this offense, the punter, I think at this point, although he might be called upon a little more this season, but who knows? I still think the offense can be dominant. I think it's important that they feel comfortable. Tyler Bass, that is, feels comfortable with the holder and kicking it through the uprights. And there's a lot of pressure on him to deliver. Like you mentioned, the big contract a couple of years back, and they paid him to be a top kicker, so he needs to perform that way. And it's a big year for Tyler Bass, and I'm looking forward to what he can do in the upcoming season. Go Padres. SD Jeremiah.
Loving it. Loving you repping your guy. See, that's what good friends are for, AJ, and you're really taking that to the next level here, right now. But all right, AJ, another jam-packed show. We'd like to thank Forefathers Organics for sponsoring today's episode and every episode here on Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk at Forefathers Organics. Their mission is to liberate, educate, and innovate with the highest quality CBD and hemp-derived products for your mind, body, and soul so you can live happy and free. Visit them at 87 Franklin Street in Dansville, online at forefathersorganics.com, or call them at 585-335-2223 to learn more about the products they offer. We forget to add anything, AJ? We fit a lot into this hour.
No, we covered it all here on Right Here, Right Now. Again, please share, like, subscribe. Training camp's kicking off here shortly. The episodes will be flowing. So we're going to be getting the content out. And again, appreciate everyone viewing today. I know it's been a couple weeks off for us. So all the listeners and people that tuned in today and listened to us talk about some off-season review and some training camp stuff and the pressure on this 24 Buffalo Bills roster, coaching staff. Those are all important things that we felt like needed to be discussed before this season kicks off. And hope maybe next time we'll talk to you, the Bills will be at St. John Fisher, getting ready for some football.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we said today has really already been said and kind of hammered to death over the past several months, but kind of a good reset for us reviewing the offseason and entering training camp with a good idea of who needs to prove themselves entering this transitional year for the Bills. Next time you'll see us is live from MafiaCon this Saturday, July 20th at the Western New York Heroes Event Center, 1001 East Delavan Ave in Buffalo. If you're out there, be sure to stop in. Tickets, I think, are going fast. It's a ticket-only event, so make sure you have tickets before you show up. A lot of Bills players expected to be on hand. Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, and Dwayne Carter. Also, media personalities, vendors, food trucks there as well. So, and I believe super fans. I think you're going to see Hannibal Lecter out there, Bills Vader, a few others. So next time you'll see us live from MafiaCon about 12 p.m. on Saturday. I want to thank Del Reed for throwing us out the invite there. Del Reed at 26 Shirts does a great job promoting the Bills and also contributing to various good causes in the Buffalo area. So excited to be a part of MafiaCon, excited to be with you right here, right now on RHRN Live Buffalo Football Talk. For AJ, it's Alex. We'll see you next time.
Peace out.